As I've said before on this show, some of us were warning about Donald Trump's authoritarian, even fascist tendencies long before the 2020 election. We were attacked for it, assailed as crazy alarmists. Well, we weren't alarmists. We weren't crazy. But what I'm about to tell you is, because in the aftermath of the election, Army General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the top officer in the United States military, not only did he compare Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler, he took steps to prevent the military from assisting in a coup if the then commander-in-chief tried to pull one off. That's according to I Alone Can Fix It, Donald J. Trump's catastrophic final year, an upcoming book by the Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington Post reporters Carol Leonnig and Philip Rucker. It's based on hundreds of hours of interviews with more than 140 people, most of whom spoke candidly only after being granted anonymity. And NBC News has obtained some of the book's most shocking excerpts. In the days after the election, Milley reportedly began thinking about how to foil a coup plot should Trump attempt one. Quote, "They may try, but they're not going to effing succeed," he told his deputies. "You can't do this without the military. You can't do this without the CIA and the FBI. We're the guys with the guns." The following month at the Army-Navy football game, Milley gave Trump, his boss, and White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, a stern ultimatum not to fire the FBI and CIA chiefs. Quote, "Just be careful," Milley said. He didn't say this in a supportive way. It was more like a warning. Milley wanted Meadows to know that he was watching. Did anyone think the leaders of the U.S. military were idiots? But the most incredible part is this description of Milley's thinking in the lead up to January 6th as Trump's rally was planned in Washington. Quote, "A student of history, Milley saw Trump as the classic authoritarian leader with nothing to lose. He described to aides that he kept having the stomach-churning feeling that some of the worrisome early stages of 20th century fascism in Germany were replaying in 21st century America. He saw parallels between Trump's rhetoric of election fraud and Adolf Hitler's insistence to his followers at the Nuremberg rallies that he was both a victim and their savior. This is a Reichstag moment," Milley told aides. "The gospel of the Fuhrer." Wow. Look, it's great that America's top general saw what many of us saw in Donald Trump. And yes, it's good news that Mark Milley was determined not to be part of an anti-democratic coup, at least according to this new book's account provided by unnamed sources, an account in which Milley conveniently comes out glowing. But you should also be alarmed not merely at Trump's anti-democratic moves, but at the military's top uniformed officer, who still today commands the nation's 1.5 million active duty soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, having to formulate a plan to disobey the commander-in-chief and talking about it to his subordinates. A lot. He didn't tell the rest of us. Look, this is America. We shouldn't have to depend on generals to save us from authoritarian rule. The answer to a genuine constitutional crisis in the United States should never be, quote, "We're the guys with the guns." This is uncharted territory in America's civil military command structure. So what will it mean for American democracy? Who better to discuss this with than Jason Stanley, professor of philosophy at Yale University and author of the 2018 book, How Fascism Works, and retired Army General Barry McCaffrey, an MSNBC military analyst. Thank you both for joining me tonight. Jason, let me start with you. According to Philip Rucker in Carol Leonig's book, on the eve of Joe Biden's inauguration, General Milley also told his security team, he told them this about the threat from Trump supporters, quote, "Here's the deal, guys. These guys are Nazis. They're Boogaloo boys. They're Proud Boys. These are the same people we fought in World War II," Milley told them. "Everyone in this room, whether you're a cop, whether you're a soldier, we're going to stop these guys to make sure we have a peaceful transfer of power." I mean, remarkable stuff. But are your feelings, Jason, as mixed on this as mine? You're a guy who's been warning about anti-fascism, notwithstanding Milley's World War II example. I'm pretty sure anti-fascism today in America shouldn't be led by generals.
That's right. We should have had journalists. We should have had academics. We should have had many more people cognizant of the threat. Unfortunately, there's a very powerful desire to think that the unthinkable can't happen. And the unthinkable was happening. And people denied it, people ridiculed it, and that was the worry. And so we're fortunate that the military did recognize the very real threat of a coup. And now that we have this on the table, going forward, there's both positives and negatives. The positive is that people will see that the unthinkable can happen. The negative is that it sets a precedent.
Okay.
People now know that this might happen, and other politicians will be thinking, maybe I can actually do this.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't have to rely on the personality of the person who happens to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's kind of worrying. General McCaffrey, when the news broke, former Obama Homeland Security official Juliette Kayyem tweeted, Milley should resign. He cannot straddle the I saved America and I don't do politics anymore. It is not good for the military. What do you say to that, and what would you have done in his place?
God, I'm watching a different movie than the one I thought I saw in January. First of all, a couple of corrections. The chairman of the JCS commands no one. The only people that are authorized to give orders to the armed forces are the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense, not the chairman, not the service chiefs. We have civilian control of the military. I think the second observation I'd make is the other great institutions of society at contemporary times were alert, were frightened. That includes Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate. It certainly includes the media. It certainly includes law enforcement. It certainly includes state election officials, and it includes the court system. So that Juliette Kayyem tweet comes out of strange thinking, in my view. Look, the chairman, the military, have to follow the legal orders of the Secretary of Defense. Trump fired the top 5 people in the Department of Defense, including a very good Secretary of Defense with a PhD and a lot of military experience. He put in a White House flunky. That guy actually had the legal authority to command forces to move internally under the enormous powers of the president for emergency declarations, for Insurrection Act, et cetera. That's what the danger was we were facing. We ought to be grateful that Mark Milley stood up to it.
I think we can be grateful that he stood up to him, but still worry about a system that produces that outcome. I'm glad you explained the point that the Joint Chiefs don't command anyone. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs don't command anyone. I guess the problem with that is that's in theory. We hear Milley himself saying we're the guys with the guns. And I'll ask you this, General. There's a lot's been made about this section in the book where Milley raises the possibility of he and his subordinates resigning en masse. Quote, they concluded they might rather serially resign than execute the order. It was a kind of Saturday night massacre in reverse. But here's the thing. They didn't contemplate that plan as a response to a coup attempt, as some thought. It was their plan if Donald Trump ordered a complete withdrawal from Afghanistan. Quote, for the Joint Chiefs, the biggest worry was the revival of one of Trump's hobby horses, pulling troops out of Afghanistan, what he had called the loser war. Now, obviously, that's their right. James Mattis resigned as defense secretary over the Syria withdrawal plan. But we're pulling out of Afghanistan now. Mark Milley's still the chairman. Does that feed into the perception that he was being political back then?
Well, again, first of all, I have no idea whether that threat to resign was based on Afghanistan. I thought quite clearly it was based on the attempt by Trump to order the armed forces to take illegal actions. So we got to go back to the beginning. And the beginning is the armed forces actually have a duty of loyalty and obedience to the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense, unless it's an illegal order. That's not political, although the chairman clearly, including this one, Mark Milley, went to Congress and was quite transparent of what was going on behind the scenes. I personally was aware as a primary source of some of these exchanges that were going on between Trump and the White House, between Milley and Stephen Miller in the Oval Office, involving an exchange of curses from the chairman directed at both Mr. Trump and the and the special assistant. So, again, I think I've known Mark Milley for 25 years. Beautifully educated, tough guy, rule of law, super athlete, beautifully educated at Princeton, Columbia University. We ought to be thankful we had this guy in office during these perilous times.
Jason, let me bring you back in. After the fall of the Nazis, there were a lot of Europeans who suddenly claimed they'd been working for the resistance all along. I wonder if this has that feel for you, not just in relation to General Milley, but a lot of these people who have been quoted in a lot of these books. I mean, wouldn't it have been nice if some of these people, including the generals, had resigned and spoken out against Trump before January 6th had happened, or before there was an election? I mean, I don't understand how you can work for someone you think is behaving like the Fuhrer and not think the rest of us need to know that.
Yeah, I think General McCaffrey is a little bit exaggerating when he said that it was widely known what was happening. It was not, as you and I know, Mehdi, since we've discussed it on this program, at the time, those of us who were saying it was a coup, those of us who were saying we face a very serious authoritarian threat, were often mocked and not taken seriously, and there was a very, very strong resistance to take it seriously. So there was a failure of communication between the discussions that the general just referenced and the media at large. There were a large number of Americans who did not take it seriously. And what we needed those discussions that were happening in Washington to be more transparent. If you're facing authoritarianism, it needs to be known that you're facing authoritarianism. You're helping those who are seeking to overthrow it by keeping that information secret. And so hopefully the next time this will happen, and there will be a next time because we've normalized this, there will be more clarity about what's going on to the public at large. Before we run out of time, one last question to you, General McCaffrey. It may not surprise you to hear that Donald Trump put out a statement today responding to these reports in which he says, quote, "If I was going to do a coup, one of the last people I would want to do it with is General Mark Milley," which is a wild thing to say. A lot of people on social media are comparing it to the unpublished O.J. Simpson book, If I Did It.
Yeah, well, Mr. Trump clearly headed what was essentially a criminal regime. And toward the end of his time in office, I was saying on public TV, I'm not sure where your guest was, that it looked to me as if it was a coup in the making. It was widely discussed that we were in trouble from Donald Trump after he lost the November election. So again, I think Trump is an absolute disgrace, a buffoon. But we've got to live with what the American people elect. And by the way, Mr. Biden won narrowly. We almost had this guy in office for a second term, which would have been a disaster for the United States, in my view. So again, look at the institutions that did hold solid, the electoral commissions, the court system, both state and federal, the media stayed on the issue. The Democratic congressional leadership, many of the governors, they stood up to Trump, and we got through this period. Let's be thankful for that.
We can be thankful for that, surely. We're out of time. General Barry McCaffrey, Professor Jason Stanley, thank you both for joining me tonight. Appreciate it.